Rude customers in the deli department of a supermarket. Thinking back on my time working in the deli and prepared foods departments of a supermarket, I can recall two incidents where I had to involve either management or security. I think it's worth telling both of these stories. They happen within a day or two of each other, although I don't remember which one came first. Because our department operated as a service counter rather than self-service, loss prevention usually didn't pay much attention to us, but during my time there were at least two exceptions. Story 1. One evening, fairly late, after the department had already closed, a customer came in. According to company policy, if we had just closed but hadn't yet started cleaning or disassembling the slicers, we were allowed to serve last-minute customers. Unfortunately, although it didn't happen often, some people thought they could still get meat right up until the entire store closed at 11 p.m., even though our department closed at 9 p.m. A balding, middle-aged man showed up. He came in around 9:45 p.m., just as I had finished taking apart the last slicer and placed its components into a sink full of soapy foam. He wanted 200 grams of roast beef with salt and pepper sliced. I told him that we were closed, and he replied, "Well, you're supposed to keep slicing after closing anyway." I explained that this only applied when the slicers were still operational, which was not the case anymore. The coworker who was closing with me suggested that he check the display case to see if there was anything already sliced. Every day we pre-sliced a few 200-gram packages of the most popular items and put them out to save time. He checked, but there was nothing left. Then, without saying a word, the man swung at my coworker. He missed, because from the moment he appeared, we both sensed something was wrong and had stepped farther back. After that, he began running through the store, creating chaos. He wasn't yelling or swearing. He was simply methodically destroying everything in his path. He had a shopping basket instead of a cart and was swinging it around, knocking products off shelves and displays. We called security, and they called the police. He was taken away. The strangest part came afterward. After this incident, a competing store hurried to announce that their deli department stayed open until the store itself closed, even though their entire store closed at 10 p.m., so the difference wasn't that significant. One employee from that competing store, after hearing the story from me, very insistently made it clear that this was supposedly our fault because we provided poor customer service by closing the deli earlier than the rest of the store. Story 2. For context, at the far end of our department there was a fresh sandwich station. It used meat sliced earlier that same morning, bread baked fresh by the bakery department, and various toppings for subs. Customers ordered a sandwich. We made it, wrapped it, and handed it over the counter. This took time, and during lunch hours we often had large lines, especially after construction started on an underground pedestrian passage under the nearby highway. The situation was further complicated by the daily special, the sandwich of the day. For example, Sunday was turkey, Monday was ham, Tuesday was any 6-inch sandwich with one type of meat when purchased with chips, and so on. To ensure customers received the discount at checkout, we wrapped the sandwich in a special sandwich of the day bag, which had a different barcode. At the peak of the lunch rush, a rude young woman appeared, covered in jewelry and dressed in an impeccably white business suit. Because of this overdressed woman, an increasingly irritated line of construction workers kept building up, as she absolutely refused to take her sandwich and leave. I wrapped it in a deluxe sandwich bag, but she insisted that it be put into a sandwich of the day bag, even though she herself had made changes to the order that increased the price. She was literally huffing and rolling her eyes because I refused to give in to her demands. Our general manager was extremely cheap, and we were strictly forbidden to add anything extra to a sandwich unless it was wrapped in a deluxe bag, which cost more than even a regular sandwich. The menu even stated, ingredients may be removed from the sandwich of the day, but not added. And we weren't talking about a single lettuce leaf or a couple of olives. This woman added full portions of salami and roast beef to her ham sandwich and still wanted me to package it as a sandwich of the day and not charge her for the extra meat. That wasn't going to happen, ma'am.
Sorry.
Eventually, she stopped whining and stormed off, much to the great relief of the impatient line behind her. She left, and I managed to serve a couple more orders when suddenly the overdressed woman reappeared, looked me straight in the eyes, leaned over the counter into the deli area, grabbed a discounted bag, and ran to the other end of the store. At that time, the bag display was close to the glass, which wasn't very high, and she had long, thin arms, so she could reach it. Normally, for such a small amount of money, loss prevention wouldn't be called, but this woman had entered a sanitary area and contaminated it. This meant I had to throw out and refill the entire bag display, and now it was no longer acceptable to ignore. The customer I was serving at that moment saw what the overdressed woman did and was as shocked as I was. He kindly allowed me to run to the phone and call security. I wasn't present during the confrontation, but later I heard that my manager, who had just gone out to receive deliveries, learned what happened and was very displeased. He told loss prevention that he would handle it himself, then personally went to the self-service area and stood next to the employee. When the overdressed woman approached with her cart, the stolen discounted bag was placed over another one. It was completely obvious that the sandwich was wrapped in 2 bags. My manager effectively blocked her path to the scanner and said, "No. Either scan the correct bag or return the sandwich to us." My manager was a former military man and didn't tolerate any nonsense. I think the overdressed woman sensed that. According to accounts, she immediately complied and silently left, not looking at anyone or speaking to anyone, like a small child caught misbehaving. After that, we moved the bag display to a different location, away from the preparation area. And although it was very inconvenient, we never faced such a problem again. For clarity, the price difference between a deluxe sandwich and a sandwich of the day was only about $3-4. In most cases, loss prevention wouldn't have intervened for such a small amount. The reason my manager and they insisted she pay full price was because her actions had caused us to throw away approximately $35 worth of bags. Plus, she was behaving extremely badly and delayed the line, causing a few customers to leave without buying a sandwich, which also cost us money. Next story, refusing a refund. I refused a full refund for a product, and the customer still didn't understand why. Many years ago, the store I worked at had a strict policy. All returns incurred a restocking fee unless the item was truly defective. Usually, people understood when we explained that we couldn't sell an opened item as new, so if it simply didn't suit them, we offered a partial refund, but not all of it. Definitely not the full amount in this case. On the first visit, the customer asked about the product. We discussed it in detail, and I answered all questions. The customer asked, "If it doesn't work, can I return it?" I replied, "If it's defective, yes. If it's not defective, there's a restocking fee of X, provided you have the receipt within 12 months, etc." The customer made the purchase. On the second visit, the customer wanted to return the product. I asked politely why. The customer said, "It doesn't do what I need. I need it to do X, and it doesn't." I said, "All right, no problem. We can refund you, but because the product is functional, it will be a partial refund." Why partial? Partial because the product works. We can't resell a product with an open box and broken seal as new. Since it's functional, we allow a return, but not full price. That's unfair. Why should I pay for something I don't need? You returned it opened and used. Now it's a used item. We cannot sell it to the next customer at full price. Since you decided you no longer needed it, we will accept it back as a courtesy, minus the costs we incurred. Well, I don't agree. I literally bought this yesterday. I remember our conversation, including the explanation about the restocking fee for non-defective items. So you agreed to it. I didn't say I agreed. I didn't explicitly say, I accept the terms of sale. I explained the terms of sale, and then you bought the product. These events occurred in that order. With this information, you could have chosen not to purchase, but you did. That constitutes agreement with the terms. No, that's not true. You said the product was functional. You said partial refund if functional, and that's exactly what we are offering now. It's the same partial refund we mentioned before the purchase. Well, it's not functional. What doesn't work? It doesn't do X, right? No, it doesn't. But it wasn't intended to do that. Yesterday, you asked many questions, and I answered them all in detail. You never mentioned X, so if the product does everything it was designed to do, it is functional. But you can't use it for your intended purpose. As a courtesy, we offer a partial refund. That's not enough. All right.
What do you mean by that?
I answered every question about the product, including the return policy. You fully knew the terms and chose to buy it. Now it's yours. We offer a partial refund for a functional product, and you say this isn't satisfactory. You don't have to accept it. That's also your choice. Then what do you expect me to do? I don't quite understand what you mean. I have no claim against you. You may accept our partial refund or not. It's up to you. We never saw him again. Next story, customer supporting the seller against a ridiculous manager. Years later, I did the same thing myself. My biggest annoyance while working retail was the manager's requirement that I had to approach customers literally every 5 minutes. The store was so small that I could already see all the customers and what they were doing from the register. This was especially frustrating when I had tasks behind the counter. So, here's the story. This happened several years ago. I was in the store, there were no people, silence. But a delivery arrived, so I had work to do. A customer entered, and I greeted him. Hi, my name's Sam. If you need anything, let me know. I also mentioned promotions. The customer said okay and started just looking around. The manager appeared shortly after. Less than 10 minutes had passed. He came up to me and asked, "Did you help the only person in the store?" I said, I greeted him and told him to come to me if he needed help. The manager wasn't satisfied and made me approach the guy again to ask if he needed help, even though less than 10 minutes had passed. The guy said no, he was just looking around and checking the sales. I stepped away. He continued browsing. Another 5 minutes passed, and the manager himself approached the customer and asked if he needed help. The man was visibly annoyed, but politely told the manager he was fine. The manager returned to the register and stood next to me. Another 5 minutes later, he told me to go again and ask the customer if he needed help. I approached, and by his face, it was absolutely clear that he was extremely irritated. I quietly said, just loud enough so the manager wouldn't hear, "Listen, sorry, I know you don't need help, but he's making me ask." The guy was still annoyed, but in his expression, a look of understanding appeared. He spoke fairly loudly, so the manager could hear. "Thanks, I'm fine. I don't need help. If I need anything, I'll find you myself. I'm not a child that needs to be led around the store." I smiled and returned to the register. The manager's face was impossible to describe. Finally, he went back behind the counter and didn't bother me for the rest of the day. Present day, being the customer. Fast forward to now, I'm a customer. Walking through a shopping center, I enter a clothing store. There are 4 employees. They greet me and I start browsing because I'm just looking. I'm there less than 10 minutes, and each of the staff has approached me to ask if I need help. After 2 of them approached me a second time, I finally said, "Look, I don't like this. Could you please call your manager?" The woman I addressed looked puzzled, but went to get the manager. The manager came out onto the floor with a standard overly strained customer service smile and asked what happened. I said I was annoyed because I was being followed around the entire store. I didn't need to be asked 20 times if I needed help. If I need help, I will find an employee myself. I'm just browsing. This constant hovering makes shopping extremely unpleasant. Now, I don't want to buy anything at all. I understand this is a policy you impose on your staff, but I'm telling you right now that it's a terrible policy. I'm leaving, and I want you to know that. Her smile noticeably faded, and you could see on her face that she was trying to formulate the right response. Meanwhile, I noticed slightly to the left 2 staff members watching us. Both smirked and smiled. One was barely holding back laughter. The other was quickly typing something on their phone, presumably in a staff chat or to a friend. Not waiting for the manager to finish apologizing, I politely repeated that I was leaving and walked out. Yes, I know some stores do this to prevent theft, but that doesn't mean you should harass your customers. Final story. Hugging a customer. Hi everyone. I decided to share one more retail story. Small disclaimer. This was many years ago, and due to a chronic illness that causes brain fog, some details have faded. I'll try to be as accurate as possible and promise not to embellish. It was the eve of Canadian Thanksgiving. In the city where I lived at the time, it was raining heavily. We already had the pre-holiday rush. People were buying stuffing and side dishes for turkey. As the rain continued and the sun set, fewer customers remained. By the end of my shift, the store had been nearly empty for an hour. I was the only cashier, and my colleague was restocking freezers and unpacking boxes. I had just finished cleaning, standing behind the register, killing time. I hated going into the freezers. I was ready to resign myself to it when a girl, soaked from the rain, ran into the store. I made a mental fist pump. Any excuse to avoid the cursed freezers was a win. She stayed by the register while looking at frozen ready-made portion meals. Yes, I hated this job, but these frozen meals literally saved my life while I worked there, so I considered myself a bit of an expert. Eventually, she approached the register, and I started light conversation while ringing her up. This was my favorite part. I have autism, and I can be awkward, but I genuinely enjoyed chatting with customers. The girl seemed shy, so I complimented her choice and mentioned how often I eat these meals myself. When I finished ringing her up, she asked if she could wait for the bus inside the store instead of standing in the cold rain. I said, of course. We continued talking about the upcoming holiday and break. She mentioned she wasn't looking forward to it. All her friends would go home for the holidays, and her family lived in another country. She'd be alone in her dorm, eating frozen meals. I could understand that to some extent, my family also lived across the country. She said she'd probably be alone on Thanksgiving. We talked about calls and video chats. She said, I'm glad I can talk to them, but it's still not the same. Sometimes I just want to hug someone. I get it. Again, while I love talking to customers, I'm quite awkward. I might say something without thinking. I'm also the type who tries to please everyone and fix everything, which sometimes creates problems. Because when a problem arises, I usually try to solve it immediately or offer a solution, instead of just listening. When she said that, an impulsive thought flashed through my mind for a split second. I see the problem. I know how to fix this. I blurted it out without thinking. Do you want a hug? A bit of context. At the time, I practically looked like the textbook definition of a butch lesbian. I have this problem where, even when you're platonic with other women, deep down you're always afraid it might be misinterpreted. Many of us have experienced awkward situations when friends pulled away after coming out with words like, I don't want you hitting on me, and how that poisons any ordinary, everyday interactions with women. I was still dealing with that inner baggage, and back then it was heavier, so you can imagine the panic I immediately felt. Despite the thought being completely impulsive and absolutely platonic, my mind raced. Oh my God, I just said something terrible. This poor girl is pouring her heart out to me, and I just blurted that. And I look like this. She's going to think I'm hitting on her. God, I just ruined her day. Does she even want this? My inner monologue stopped. She looked at me a bit cautiously, but not at all like she was thinking what I had convinced myself she was. I was about to backtrack and apologize, but instead, I just nodded and said, yes, of course. I stepped out from behind the counter and gave her a real hug. And as silly as it may sound, I tried to make it sincere. I wanted her to feel even a little bit better. I didn't know if I could actually improve the situation, but damn it, I was going to try. Then I returned to the register, and she lingered nearby a little. I was still slightly panicked, but overall, everything looked fine. After a few moments, she said it was time for her to leave. The bus was almost there, and if she missed it, she'd have to wait another 20 minutes. I wished her well, told her to take care, and a happy Thanksgiving. At the door, she stopped and turned back. We were both wearing masks, but her eyes seemed to smile at me. I hope I'll see you here again. And that's how she left. Sometimes I still cringe at myself and my awkwardness, and occasionally worry that the stranger might have thought I was some weird creepy __. But at the same time, the memory of that day somehow warms my heart. We were just two strangers, both away from home. Both feeling lonely on a day advertised everywhere as a celebration of family togetherness. And we simply had a very human interaction. I hope she finished her studies and found people in her life who made her feel less homesick. She seemed so sincere and kind. I truly wish her all the best. And I never saw her again. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to all these stories from the world of customer service and sales. If you enjoyed them, be sure to like this video and check out our previous clips. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Good luck!